Some people say, if you live by the sword, there's a good chance you'll die by one. The same holds true for some of the biggest mafia bosses who met some of the most brutal ends in history. In this video, I'll show you the grisly details of some of the most savage deaths of mafia bosses. Bugsy Seagull. Benjamin Bugsy Seagull was born on February 28, 1906, and grew up to become a prominent American mobster. Alongside his childhood friend Meyer Lansky, he played a pivotal role in the Jewish mob, and later became influential within the Italian-American Mafia and the National Crime Syndicate. Known for his striking looks and charm, Seagull became a notorious figure, often appearing in the media as one of the first celebrity gangsters. During Prohibition, Seagull was involved in bootlegging and profiting from illegal alcohol distribution. After the repeal of Prohibition with the 21st Amendment in 1933, he shifted his focus to gambling operations. In 1936, seeking new opportunities, Seagull relocated from New York to California. His involvement in organized crime expanded significantly. He was a founding member and leader of Murder, Inc., a notorious enforcement arm notorious for carrying out contract killings. His reputation as a skilled hitman and enforcer grew, emphasizing his proficiency with firearms and willingness to use violence. In 1939, Bugsy Seagull entered a bizarre venture with Countess Dorothy DeFrasso, a Hollywood socialite, aiming to sell a powerful explosive called Atomite to Italy's fascist government under Benito Mussolini. They hoped this would land them a lucrative contract, but their plans fell apart when Atomite failed to impress during a demonstration in Rome. During their time in Rome, Seagull and the Countess reportedly encountered Hermann Göring, a high-ranking Nazi official visiting Mussolini. Despite being Jewish, Seagull humorously remarked later that he regretted not taking the opportunity to assassinate Göring when he had the chance. But despite his charm and his deep connections to the streets, nothing would have prepared him for what was coming. On the evening of June 20th, 1947, Bugsy Seagull was reading a newspaper at his girlfriend's home in Beverly Hills when a gunman fired 9 shots through the window using a .30 carbine. Seagull was struck by 4 bullets, one of which dislodged his eye from its socket, causing instant death. The assassination bore all the hallmarks of a typical gangland hit. Despite widespread media coverage and a large-scale police investigation, the exact reason behind Seagull's killing remains unconfirmed to this day. No one was ever charged with killing Bugsy Seagull, and the case is still unsolved. There are different ideas about why he was killed. Some say it was because he spent too much money or stole from his gang. Others think it was because of personal conflicts, like threats he made against someone's husband. Paul Castellano. Born on June 26, 1915 in Brooklyn, New York, Castellano grew up in a world where crime was a way of life. As a young man, he was already involved in the streets with strings of petty thefts and small-time hustles, but it was his family connections that set the stage for his rise to power. Castellano was the cousin of Carlo Gambino, the revered boss of the Gambino crime family. This relationship provided him with a direct line to the upper echelons of the Mafia. In the 1940s, Castellano began to make a name for himself within the family. He was involved in every mafia-type crime, including loan sharking, extortion, and labor racketeering. When Carlo Gambino suffered a heart attack in 1976, he made a decision that would shape the future of the family. Instead of passing the mantle to his underboss, Agnello Della Croce, Gambino chose Paul Castellano as his successor. This decision was controversial and sowed the seeds of discord within the family. Della Croce, a traditionalist who believed in the old ways of the mafia, was sidelined in favor of Castellano's more business-oriented approach. As the new boss, Castellano sought to modernize the family's operations. He distanced himself from the street-level activities that had defined the mafia for decades and focused on white-collar crimes. Under his leadership, the Gambino family expanded its influence in legitimate businesses, including construction, trucking, and the garment industry. Castellano's vision was to transform the family into a sophisticated criminal enterprise that operated with the efficiency of a corporation. However, Castellano's leadership style was not without its detractors. Many within the family, particularly those loyal to Della Croce, viewed him as aloof and out of touch with the realities of the street. His decision to appoint his bodyguard, Thomas Bellotti, as underboss only fueled the discontent. Bellotti was seen as inexperienced and merely a puppet for Castellano, further alienating the traditionalists within the family. On Monday, December 16, 1985, Paul Castellano was driven to a meeting at Sparks Steakhouse by his driver and associate, Thomas Bellotti. Outside the restaurant, a hit team was waiting, including Salvatore Salvatore Scala, Edward Lino, and John Carneglia, with backup shooters positioned nearby. John Gotti and Sammy Gravano watched from a car across the street as Castellano stepped out of the car around 5:26 p.m. The gunman rushed up and fired multiple shots, fatally hitting him. John Carneglia reportedly delivered the fatal shot to Castellano's head. Bellotti was also shot as he exited the driver's side of the car. After the shooting, Gotti drove over to inspect the bodies before leaving the scene. Albert Anastasia. Albert Anastasia's rise to power within the Mafia is a tale of ambition, ruthlessness, and strategic alliances. Born Umberto Anastasio on September 26, 1902, in the small Italian town of Tropea, he immigrated to the United States in 1919. Like many immigrants of the time, he sought a better life, but his path would soon diverge into the dark corridors of organized crime. Upon arriving in New York City, Anastasia found work as a longshoreman on the Brooklyn waterfront. The docks were a hotbed of criminal activity, and it wasn't long before Anastasia became involved in the local underworld. His imposing physical presence and willingness to use violence to achieve his goals quickly caught the attention of established mobsters. By the 1920s, Anastasia had joined the gang led by Joe the Boss Masseria, one of the most powerful mafia figures in New York. Masseria's organization was embroiled in a bitter and bloody conflict known as the Castellano's War, a power struggle between rival mafia factions. Anastasia's loyalty and ferocity made him a valuable asset in this violent struggle for dominance. The turning point in Anastasia's rise came in 1931. The Castellano's War was reaching its climax, and a new alliance was forming under the leadership of Charles Lucky Luciano. Luciano, along with his allies, sought to modernize and consolidate the mafia's operations, moving away from the old world traditions that had fueled the conflict. To achieve this, they needed to eliminate Joe Masseria. Anastasia played a crucial role in the assassination of Joe Masseria. On April 15, 1931, Masseria was lured to a meeting at a Coney Island restaurant. As he played cards, Anastasia and several other gunmen burst into the room and opened fire, killing Masseria. This bold and brutal act marked the end of the Castellano's War and solidified Anastasia's position within the new mafia order. With Masseria out of the way, Luciano and his allies, including Anastasia, set about restructuring the mafia. They established the Commission, a governing body designed to mediate disputes and oversee the activities of the various crime families. Anastasia's loyalty and effectiveness during the Castellano's War earned him a prominent role in this new order. Anastasia's reputation for brutality and efficiency led to his involvement in Murder Inc., a group of contract killers who carried out hits for the Mafia. Under the leadership of Louis Lepke Buchalter and Albert Anastasia, Murder Inc. became infamous for its ruthlessness. The group was responsible for hundreds of murders during the 1930s and 1940s, eliminating anyone who posed a threat to the Mafia's interests. By the 1940s, Anastasia had risen to the position of underboss in the Mangano crime family, one of the 5 families of New York. However, his ambition knew no bounds, and he soon set his sights on the top spot. In 1951, Anastasia orchestrated the murder of Vincent Mangano, the family's boss, and his brother Philip. With the Mangano brothers out of the way, Anastasia assumed control of the family, renaming it the Anastasia crime family. As the head of his own crime family, Anastasia continued to exert his influence over the New York underworld, but by 1957, he too would receive the same dosage he had meted on Masseria, his former boss. On the morning of October 25, 1957, Albert Anastasia went to the barbershop at the Park Sheraton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. His driver parked the car and left Anastasia unprotected. While Anastasia was in the barber's chair, 2 masked men burst in, pushed the barber aside, and shot at him. After the first shots, Anastasia apparently tried to fight back, but he mistakenly attacked the reflections of his assailants in the barbershop's mirror. The gunman kept shooting until Anastasia collapsed and died on the floor. Carmine Galante. Carmine Galante's journey into the dark world of organized crime began in the gritty streets of East Harlem, New York. Born on February 21, 1910, Galante was the son of Italian immigrants who had come to America in search of a better life. However, young Carmine quickly found himself drawn to a different path, one marked by violence and crime. By the age of 15, Galante had already been involved in a series of petty crimes, ranging from theft to assault. His early brushes with the law only seemed to fuel his ambition, and he soon caught the attention of local mobsters. Recognizing his potential, they took him under their wing, and Galante began his ascent through the ranks of the Mafia. Galante's ruthless nature and willingness to do whatever it took to achieve his goals made him a valuable asset to the Bonanno crime family. By By the 1930s, he had become a trusted enforcer, known for his brutal efficiency in carrying out hits and other criminal activities. His reputation for violence earned him the nickname Lilo, a reference to his constant cigar smoking habit, which became one of his most recognizable trademarks. As the years went by, Galante's influence within the Bonventre family continued to grow. He played a key role in expanding the family's operations, particularly in the lucrative heroin trade. By the 1950s, Galante had established himself as a major player in the international drug trafficking scene, forging alliances with powerful criminal organizations in Sicily and other parts of Europe. In 1974, Galante was appointed as the acting boss of the Bonventre family, a position that allowed him to consolidate his power and expand his control over the heroin trade. Under his leadership, the family's drug operations flourished, bringing in millions of dollars in profits. However, Galante's unchecked ambition and aggressive tactics also made him a target, both within the Mafia and among law enforcement agencies. Despite numerous arrests and convictions over the years, Galante always managed to find a way to avoid long-term imprisonment. But as Galante's power grew, so did the number of those who sought to bring him down. His monopolization of the heroin trade and his ruthless elimination of rivals created a growing sense of unease within the Mafia. Many feared that his actions would draw unwanted attention from law enforcement and threaten the stability of the entire organization. It was this mounting tension that would ultimately lead to his brutal and bloody demise. In 1979, Carmine Galante, known for his bold attempt to dominate the narcotics trade, faced growing opposition from New York's crime families. Frank Thierry, boss of the Genovese crime family, and others in the Cosa Nostra sought to eliminate him. Even Joseph Bonanno, retired but still influential, approved the plan. When Philip Rastelli, the official Bonanno boss, requested commission approval to kill Galante, it was swiftly granted. On July 12, 1979, Galante was having lunch at Joe and Mary's Italian-American restaurant in Brooklyn with Leonard Coppola and Giuseppe Tirano, both Bonanno members loyal to him, and his Sicilian bodyguards. Three masked men stormed in, armed with shotguns and handguns, and opened fire. Galante, Tirano, and Coppola were killed instantly, while the bodyguards were unharmed. Photographs from the scene showed Galante with a cigar still in his mouth, a stark image of the mobster's demise. Sam Giancana. From a young age, Giancana exhibited a rebellious streak and a knack for getting into trouble. By his teenage years, he had already become involved in petty crimes, running errands for local gangsters and participating in small-time thefts. His criminal activities quickly escalated, and he joined a street gang known as the 42 Gang, which was notorious for its violent and ruthless behavior. Giancana's reputation as a formidable enforcer caught the attention of the Chicago Outfit, a powerful organized crime syndicate led by the infamous Al Capone. The outfit, also known as the Chicago Mafia, controlled various illegal enterprises, including bootlegging, gambling, and prostitution. Giancana's entry into the outfit marked the beginning of his meteoric rise within the criminal underworld. During the 1930s, Giancana proved himself to be an invaluable asset to the outfit. One of Giancana's most significant contributions to the outfit was his role in expanding their gambling operations. He masterminded the creation of a vast network of illegal gambling dens and bookmaking operations, generating millions of dollars in revenue for the organization. His success in this area solidified his position within the outfit and demonstrated his keen business acumen. As Giancana's influence grew, so did his connections with powerful figures outside the criminal underworld. He forged alliances with corrupt politicians, law enforcement officials, and even members of the entertainment industry. These connections provided him with a level of protection and legitimacy that few mobsters could boast. One of the most notable relationships Giancana cultivated was with Frank Sinatra, the legendary singer and actor. On the night of June 19, 1975, just before he was set to testify before the Church Committee investigating CIA and Mafia connections, Sam Giancana was fatally shot in his Oak Park, Illinois home. A gunman entered through the basement and shot him 7 times with a .22 caliber pistol. His body was discovered later that evening by his caretaker, Joseph DiPerzio, in the kitchen where Giancana was preparing food. Giancana had recently undergone gallbladder surgery in Houston and was found dead shortly after returning home. He was buried beside his wife Angeline at Mount Carmel Cemetery in Hillside, Illinois. Following Giancana's murder, revelations emerged about his close ties to Tony Spilotro, a rising figure in the Chicago outfit. Spilotro was frequently at Giancana's house and had devised secretive ways to enter the property unnoticed. The circumstances surrounding Giancana's death remain complex, with motivations speculated to be multifaceted, echoing the mysterious nature of other high-profile mob assassinations, like that of Bugsy Seagull. Salvatore Maranzano, Salvatore Maranzano's story begins in Castellamare del Golfo, Sicily, where he was born in 1886. This small coastal town was a hotbed of mafia activity, and from a young age, Maranzano was exposed to the clandestine world of organized crime. The mafia's influence permeated every aspect of life in Castellamare del Golfo, shaping Maranzano's destiny in ways that would later reverberate across the Atlantic. In the early 1900s, Maranzano's ambitions led him to emigrate to the United States, where he saw greater opportunities for power and wealth. He settled in New York City, a melting pot of cultures and a burgeoning hub for organized crime. The mafia in America was still in its formative years, and Maranzano saw an opportunity to carve out his own empire. Upon his arrival in New York, Maranzano quickly aligned himself with the powerful mafia boss Joe Masseria, who controlled much of the city's criminal activities. Masseria, known as Joe the Boss, was a formidable figure, but Maranzano's ambition knew no bounds. He began to build his own network of loyal followers, many of whom were fellow Sicilian immigrants from his hometown. Maranzano was a master of manipulation, often playing rivals against each other to further his own interests. His ability to navigate the treacherous waters of mafia politics earned him the respect and fear of his peers. By the mid-1920s, Maranzano had established himself as a key player in New York's criminal underworld. So when the Castellamare War, named after Maranzano's hometown, erupted in the late 1920s, he allied with a young and ambitious mobster named Charles "Lucky" Luciano. Luciano, who had grown disillusioned with Masseria's leadership, saw in Maranzano a kindred spirit and a potential ally. Together, they plotted to overthrow Masseria and reshape the mafia in their own image. In 1931, the Castellamare's War reached its climax when Maranzano orchestrated the assassination of Joe Masseria. The hit was carried out by Luciano and his associates, who lured Masseria to a restaurant in Coney Island and gunned him down in cold blood. With Masseria out of the picture, Maranzano declared himself the boss of bosses, the undisputed leader of the American mafia. But declaring himself boss of all bosses meant that he inherited the legitimate paranoia of all the bosses before him. In September 1931, tensions between Salvatore Maranzano and Charles "Lucky" Luciano reached a critical point. Maranzano, fearing Luciano's growing influence, hired Mad Dog Call to eliminate him. However, Luciano was tipped off by Tommy Lucchese about the assassination plot. On September 10th, Maranzano summoned Luciano and Vito Genovese to his office at the New York Central Building. Suspecting Maranzano planned to kill them, Luciano decided to strike first. He enlisted 4 Jewish gangsters, unknown to Maranzano's associates, and secured with the help of Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Seagull, and Frank Costello. Disguised as government agents, 2 of these men disarmed Maranzano's guards, while the other 2, guided by Lucchese, attacked Maranzano, stabbing and then shooting him multiple times. This assassination marked the beginning of what became known as the Night of the Sicilian Vespers. After Maranzano's death, Luciano could have declared himself capo di tutti capi, boss of all bosses, but he chose to abolish this title. He believed it caused division among the crime families and made its holder a target for rivals. Instead, Luciano established the commission as the governing body for organized crime, aiming to maintain stability and cooperation among the families. Antonio Caponigro, Philadelphia in the 1950s, was a city simmering with criminal activity, with the Philadelphia crime family at its heart, led by Angelo Bruno, dubbed the Gentle Don for his cautious and strategic approach. Bruno's leadership style, focused on avoiding unnecessary violence and maintaining a low profile, earned him respect both within the underworld and beyond. Antonio Caponigro, a rising figure within the family, quickly distinguished himself through ambition and ruthlessness. Starting as an enforcer and debt collector, Caponigro soon aimed higher, driven by a desire to ascend the ranks and wield substantial influence within the organization. By the early 1960s, his involvement in illicit ventures like loan sharking, extortion, and gambling bolstered the family's coffers, earning him the trust and favor of Angelo Bruno. Despite Bruno's cautious regard for Caponigro's aggressive nature, he recognized the younger man's ability to generate revenue and maintain order. Bruno elevated Caponigro to the rank of capo, granting him significant authority within the family. Caponigro's crew became known for their efficiency and readiness to employ violence when necessary, marking his ascent to power with calculated moves and strategic alliances. However, Caponigro grew increasingly discontented with Bruno's conservative leadership style. He believed the family could achieve greater prominence under his direction, without the constraints imposed by Bruno's cautious approach. This dissatisfaction set the stage for a deadly power struggle that would shake the foundations of the Philadelphia crime family. In the late 1970s, tensions between Caponigro and Bruno escalated sharply. Caponigro began plotting plotting against Bruno, garnering support from within the family, and forging alliances with allies in New York. His aim was clear: to eliminate Bruno and assume control of the family, ushering in a new era of dominance and expansion. Bruno, ever watchful, sensed the threat posed by Caponigro's ambitions, but chose to handle it discreetly, hoping to avoid bloodshed. However, Caponigro's insatiable hunger for power and disregard for protocol led him to orchestrate Bruno's assassination in 1979. The bold move was intended to secure Caponigro's position as the new boss of the Philadelphia crime family. The fallout was immediate and severe. The Mafia Commission, outraged by the unauthorized hit on Bruno, swiftly identified Caponigro as the mastermind behind the assassination. His actions were viewed as a direct challenge to the Commission's authority and a violation of Mafia protocol, sparking a chain of events that would prove catastrophic for Caponigro. In April 1980, Caponigro was lured into a trap under the guise of a meeting to formalize his leadership role. Instead, he faced the wrath of the Commission, including powerful figures like Carlo Gambino and Paul Castellano. Accused of acting without authorization, Caponigro was sentenced to death as a warning against future defiance. Caponigro was tortured, beaten, stabbed, and ultimately shot multiple times, his body callously disposed of in a deserted area, and roughly $300 stuffed into his mouth and anus to symbolize his greed. VTO Bonventre. VTO Bonventre, born in 1875 in Sicily, made his way to the United States in the early 20th century. He established himself as a key player in the Mafia, particularly during the Prohibition era when bootlegging was a lucrative enterprise. His strategic mind and ruthless enforcement of Mafia rules earned him a significant role within the Bonanno family. Vito's influence extended beyond mere criminal activities. He was a power broker, a man whose decisions could sway the balance of power within the Mafia. The Bonanno crime family, one of the 5 families that dominated organized crime in New York City, was a world where loyalty was paramount, but betrayal was always lurking in the shadows. The family was founded by Joseph Bonanno, who led it with an iron fist, ensuring that it became one of the most powerful mafia organizations in the United States. The Bonanno family's operations included everything from drug trafficking and loan sharking to gambling and murder. It was a world where power was everything, and those who sought it had to be willing to kill or be killed. VTO Bonventre thrived in this environment, his ambitions driving them to the upper echelons of the Mafia hierarchy. However, their prominence also made them targets in the brutal power struggles that characterized the Mafia's internal dynamics. The Bonanno family was no stranger to violence. It was a place where disputes were often settled with bullets rather than words. The constant jockeying for power meant that even the most powerful figures were never truly safe. During the early months of the Castellammarese War, which erupted in the early 1930s between rival factions in the American Mafia, Cesare Bonventre found himself targeted by Castellammarese-born members of Joe Masseria's gang. This conflict arose as Masseria sought to consolidate his control over Mafia operations in New York City. Initially aligned with Shiro's gang, Bonventre became a casualty of the escalating tensions. Masseria pressured Shiro to pay a hefty sum of $10,000 and relinquish leadership of the gang, effectively weakening Shiro's position. Subsequently, on July 15, 1930, Bonventre met a violent end when he was gunned down outside his garage. His assassination was part of the ruthless power struggles and retaliatory acts that defined the Castellammarese War, ultimately reshaping the landscape of organized crime in America. George Bugs Moran and the Valentine's Day Massacre. George Bugs Moran, born Adelard Cunin on August 21, 1893, in St. Paul, Minnesota, was destined for a life steeped in crime. Raised in a tough neighborhood where survival often required bending or breaking the law, Moran found himself drawn to the excitement and danger of street life from a young age. His early forays into petty theft and gang activities quickly escalated, landing him in trouble with the law by the age of 19 for robbery. Rather than deterring him, this early brush with the justice system seemed to embolden Moran, solidifying his determination to ascend the ranks of the criminal underworld. By the early 1920s, Moran had relocated to Chicago, a city ripe with opportunities for ambitious gangsters during Prohibition. It was here that he joined forces with the North Side Gang, led by Dean O'Banion, a seasoned bootlegger and criminal. O'Banion recognized Moran's potential and took him under his wing, mentoring him in the illicit alcohol trade and the brutal realities of gang warfare. Moran's fearlessness and readiness to employ violence methods to achieve his objectives earned him the moniker Bugs, reflecting his unpredictable nature. Under O'Banion's guidance, Moran swiftly rose through the ranks of the Northside Gang, becoming one of its key enforcers and trusted lieutenants. Together, they carved out a substantial share of Chicago's illegal alcohol market, challenging rival gangs, including the formidable South Side Gang led by Al Capone. Tensions between Moran and Capone escalated dramatically after O'Banion's assassination in 1924, a murder widely attributed to Capone and his allies. Following O'Banion's death, Moran, alongside Jaime Weiss and Vincent Drucci, assumed leadership of the Northside Gang. Their primary goal became avenging O'Banion's killing, leading to a series of retaliatory strikes against Capone's operations. Moran's leadership was marked by aggressive tactics and strategic maneuvers aimed at expanding his influence and retaliating against his enemies. The pinnacle of Moran's rivalry with Capone came on February 14, 1929, the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Moran and his top lieutenants were lured to a garage under false pretenses, where Capone's gunmen, disguised as police officers, brutally executed 7 members of the Northside Gang in a meticulously planned ambush. Moran narrowly escaped the massacre by arriving late and fleeing upon realizing the trap. The aftermath of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre was devastating for Moran and the Northside Gang. Several of his closest associates were killed, severely weakening the gang and diminishing Moran's power. That brings us to the end of this video. For more interesting videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.